Welcome, friends and family. Happy afternoon in the US and good evening to all of you in Europe. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon and tonight. Today's talk kicks off our first terroir talk for the fall on tech. I hope this finds that all of you had a beautiful summer that was relatively tech-free. While you're getting your seats in the audience, I just want to introduce myself. My name is Brooke Berry. I'm a filmmaker and a marketing, PR, and event consultant based currently in Louisville, Kentucky, having lived in Manhattan for years before that and in Southern Africa before that. So for those of you who are joining us for the 100th time, welcome. It's so good to see our terroir family back in front of the camera. And for those of you joining us for the first time today, welcome. I hope this is the first of many opportunities for us to have dialogue. And for those of you who haven't been with us before, I just want to introduce Terroir. Our mission is to help educate people about ethical terroir-driven food and beverage systems. We introduce people to the farmers, fishermen, butchers, bakers, and winemakers who produce things that we love to eat and drink. We work with chefs, sommeliers, and restaurant professionals to help us share these stories. Together, we create a community that helps shape a better food system. And this is the brainchild of Arlene Stein, started in 2007 out of Toronto. Our community has grown into a global community of restaurateurs, chefs, producers, food lovers, food critics, food writers. And I hope that you'll become a part of that from now going forward. I'll talk to you after our talk today about upcoming events in November. We'll have our next Terroir Symposium, which sadly is again going to be online, but here's hoping 22 brings us a chance to get together face to face. So the way our Terroir talk is going to work, I'm going to introduce our conversation with the prompt that brought you here. I'm going to introduce our amazing guest. I have a personal connection to our guests today beyond what I usually have. So I'm very, very excited for them to be here. And then we'll have a dialogue. If you have any questions, if anything comes up in your mind while we're having a conversation with amongst ourselves, pop it in the chat. I've already pre-populated the chat with some handles from Instagram so that you can follow our friends who are online today in Terroir, as well as their websites and their blogs, so that you can stay posted, because I'm sure the things that we're going to talk about today are only going to spring to your mind more questions, more interest, and you're going to definitely want to buy Abena's food and go visit JJ in New York City and wherever else he's cooking his beautiful food. So without further ado, may I introduce my dear friend, Chef JJ Johnson. Welcome, Chef. JJ Johnson is an award-winning chef, founder, TV personality, and author. Chef JJ presents an environment for connection through food that transcends people, memories, and generations. His diligent efforts toward the food industry have amounted to untouchable accolades, including a James Beard Award-winning for Best Author and nominations for Best Chef and Rising New Star in NYC. Forbes and Zagat 30 Under 30, and this is personally close to my heart, 2 times Best New Restaurant of the Year winner with Esquire magazine. We just, true story, happened to work together for the first one of those. His ability to combine culturally relevant ingredients with classical techniques is showcased at FieldTrip, his quick casual rice bowl shop that highlights the future of food. You can catch him today on his television show, Just Eats, airing on Clio TV. And he's just started a beautiful community called Cookout that I really, really hope that you'll follow on Instagram. Chef, thank you for being here with us.
Thanks, Brooke. It's a pleasure being with you and good to see you. It's been too long.
You too. You too. And also with us today is my new friend, Abena Offeh-Gyimah, who is a writer, a researcher, a food consultant, and an advocate for Indigenous food sovereignty systems. She's worked at Black Creek Community Farm as a coordinator for the youth farming program, with Building Roots as an urban gardener coordinator, with North York Community House as a strong neighborhood coordinator, and currently project co-lead with the Jane Finch Community Research Partnership. Her food business, Adda Blooms, seeks to work with small-scale farmers to bring ancestral food worldwide. Her blog seeks to explore the intersections between food, culture, and equity, and I've added a link to that blog in our chat. Abena is passionate about preserving indigenous plants, seeds, and seeks to work in collaboration with small-scale farmers to grow and preserve ancestral foods. I should say, Abena is literally, I talked to her 2 days ago in Ghana. She's now in Toronto. So welcome from 2 different continents, Abena.
Hi, Brooke. Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me. Hi, JJ. It's great. I'm excited for this conversation.
Amazing. So let me just ground us in the conversation with our prompt. We'll definitely veer off it, but this is what brought you guys here in the first place. So the past 18 months have tested the restaurant and food community beyond their capacity. Desperate to stay alive and continue to work in an environment they love, there was much positivity that came out of the constant struggle with pandemic issues. Food leaders were forced to re-examine the way they worked and pivot multiple times in order to continue to provide much needed support. They also relied on each other to find ways to stay positive and motivated through a crushing period and look at new opportunities and stay motivated. Social gastronomy became a welcome outlet for professionals to feel like they were doing meaningful work while supporting systems of food security, justice, and sustainability. So I'm gonna kick it to you first, JJ, because one of my earliest memories of the COVID pandemic was turning on my television and seeing you handing out food on MSNBC. And JJ, of course, JJ and I have stayed in contact over the years because we worked together. I knew he developed this new restaurant concept in FieldTrip. He was opening restaurants in Harlem, Long Island City, and Rockefeller Center, the middle of Manhattan. And there you were making this huge pivot to service your community. We can talk about the logistics around that because there's superhero level, but how did you do that? What made you think that you could do that?
Well, just so everybody knows, me and Brooke worked together at the Cecil back in the day. And I know I'm supposed to talk about this, but what I think is what was really important around food, like food really connects people, is Brooke was calling me, like emailing me, calling me, saying, you have to meet this person. You have to meet this person. And I'm like, okay, Brooke, she loves rice. She can connect you with all the best rice in the world. And it happened to be, I call her Addie, but it happened to be Abena. And I was like, me and her already spoke. We spoke like 3 weeks ago, Brooke, what are you talking about? But it just shows you that the world, food will always bring people together some way, somehow, when somebody's doing something great. And you know, if we go back to the Cecil day, Brooke, we used to feed the tenants upstairs. That's right. True. They were homeless. They got off the street. They then had apartments. They were just getting on their feet. We would give them a Thanksgiving style meal every week on a Wednesday. And everybody thought I was crazy because I was giving them the food was too good. The proteins were too nice. JJ, you don't need what are you doing? And for me, it was like, well, they need to get an experience. And during the pandemic, food insecurity has always been near and dear to my heart. And that video on MSNBC was a moment during the pandemic when I partnered up with Harlem Grown. Harlem Grown is an organization in Harlem that has hydroponic farms, similar to what you would see in Noma, right in the heart of Harlem. And Tony said to me, I have shelters, JJ. They're women battered shelters. They are not getting any food. They normally get their food in school. What can we do? And we started bagging up hundreds and hundreds of meals and dropping them off at all the shelters where his kids were. And that was just one part of the pandemic. We were feeding frontline workers because my wife as a nurse was saying that nurses and doctors were too busy to eat or even purchase food. We were feeding with NYCHA right across the street, farmers baskets. It was just something that I believe, like, restaurants waste so much food that this was a chance for us to put food out into the world, help people, put a smile on their face. And we built a buy a bowl program, which allowed employees of mine to come back to work as well. So it was a full sustainable program that was being built. But it was also just the right thing to do. I don't think I would have, if I look back and would I do anything else? It was the first time in my career where it's like, I own this restaurant. I don't have to go to the committee to say, do you want to do this? It was like, well, I can do it. And then I just have to get I have to get the rest of the team bought into the program, and everybody got bought in. And we're still feeding people with Rethink Food now, 200 meals a day at a church in Harlem, you know, community give back, justice, however you want to phrase it. I think restaurants could be the bridge of it all.
So it's safe to say that that is one of the silver linings that came out of COVID, that you were doing this work all along. You have built a business around your passion for community. So you had already laid those foundations, and it was literally calling on the different aspects of your community to bring them together logistically to move things forward. So was COVID ultimately an advantage for you?
Yeah, it's crazy to say that COVID actually helped out the business for us at FieldTrip and myself. I think it did two things. It helped the community get awareness of who we were at a time. And it also made me focus back on food a lot more. I was traveling a lot. I was doing a lot of brand things, but it allowed me to focus on the business a lot more and really develop this ethos of what I believe FieldTrip should be for the future, why I call it the future of food. And it takes a community to do it. There's no other way in my eyes.
So part of the conversations that we have around hospitality and how we re-enter into this world, often, this is something that Abena and I were talking about last week, often leave off the very, very important aspect of the producer and where you get things from. And I want to talk to you, Abena, really quickly, or not really quickly, but shift to you and ask you what drove you to seek out Superfoods in Ghana to distribute to the West, and connect with chefs like JJ to bring this nutrient dense food that you're working. I guess let's talk about your business, and let's talk about the different grains that you represent at Adda Blooms. You've got baobab, you've got fonio, you've got millet, you've got ancestral rice. Tell us about why those things are valuable. Let's start there.
All right, thanks, Brooke. Just to give a quick background. So I was farming around 2014 to 2016. I live in Toronto in the Jane and Finch community. It's one of the most disadvantaged communities economically. So there is a farm, a 4-acre farm, and actually I think 47-acre farm, right spot in the middle of the city, growing organic food to bring healthy, affordable food to the community. So I was a youth farmer. I was also coordinating the youth farming program. And around that period, there was also a shift, right, where a lot of folks wanted to know what's in my food, where is my food coming from, how is my food being grown. So I became very interested in terms of what was happening in Ghana, as well as the African continent, around organic foods. You know, for most folks like myself, when we think of home, like when I think of Ghana, we typically think a lot of the food is organic or that it's natural. And I think very often we forget the impact of North Americans' food system on what's actually happening on the ground, right, on the African continent. So in 2017, like with a huge dream to go and learn about indigenous African food, you know, I was pumped. I was learning about farming, seeds. I wanted to be a farmer. So I get to Ghana and I realized that a lot of the indigenous foods were dying, right? So I was seeing baobab trees that are have lived 5,000 years old that were dying. You know, people are shifting from growing their indigenous food, sorghum, millet, to growing corn. And for me, it was just the moment that was like, oh my gosh, we are losing our indigenous foods, right? All these foods are declining. And that a lot of the Western food, right, the standard North American diet was quickly becoming adopted, right, into a lot of the diets of folks in Ghana. And so for me, it was a period where I decided that how can we preserve a lot of indigenous food? Because one, if we're losing the seeds what are the long-term implications, right, for the environment, for the food system, for people's health, people's wellness? And I remember one of the things that I think in our conversation that I mentioned is that with the food industry here, one of the things that's always missing for me, especially in the restaurant industry, is the connection back to the farm, right? The connection back to the farmer, the person who grows the food and how the food is being grown. And that's something I felt was really missing from the conversation. So I wanted to bring indigenous ancestral African food to the world. And the conversation of superfood was already happening, right? With acai berry and quinoa and all these other foods. And I thought baobab was really representative, right, of the African continent. This big, ginormous tree that's resilient, that not only feeds human, but animals, and it's incredible for the environment. So I started with baobab as a way to tell the narrative of preserving indigenous African foods. And then it went with, millet and tiger nut and fonio, bambara beans, and now with rice. And even the story of the rice, actually. So, and how JJ and I connected. So when COVID actually started, I connected with rice farmers in Ghana in March. Yeah, last year, rice farmers in Ghana. And, there was a lockdown. People are not prepared in Ghana around that time to really go on a 2-week lockdown. So I connected with the rice farmers that really produce the indigenous African rice. And I was like, okay, if I could fundraise here, can you pack 500 bags of rice so we can distribute that to communities in Ghana? The rice farmers were like, yes, we're ready. Thanks to the amazing farmer, Madam Janet. So I was able to use my platform, Adda Blooms, to fundraise. And then we sent the money to the rice farmers, and they were able to distribute 500 bags of locally grown rice to communities. So for me, the business was really about how do we preserve a lot of our natural indigenous food, not just for health and wealth and nutritional benefits, but food is also about traditions, right? It's about festivities and the ceremonies. And food is also about storytelling, people's culture and tradition. So preserving indigenous food for me was about preserving those cultures and traditions. So when JJ and I initially connected on the rice at Gleberima, the indigenous rice, I had to start doing a lot of research, right? I had to start looking into it, connected with the farmers that were growing it on the Ghana-Togo border. And it just blew my mind, right? Just to know that this rice that has been there over 3,500 years ago, it's just in this raw state that, it was declining and farmers need to grow it and preserve it. But just to learn like the traditions and the histories and the travel of it, that was absolutely incredible for me. And those narrative and storytelling and histories for me are a key part to being able to preserve a lot of native indigenous foods.
Well, hold on here. Most people in Ghana eat basmati rice. I don't think people realize that.
Exactly. Right? Yes.
So you go there, you talk to people in Accra. They're like, "What do you mean rice? And what are you talking about?" They don't even know that Gleberima exists. They're eating basmati rice. That's the most consumed rice there. So me and Addie got together. She sent me the rice, everybody. It's delicious on the low before it was in bags. But for me, if you like Glenn Roberts, who connected us, at Blackberry Farm, I cooked at Blackberry Farm years ago. I was in search for Gleberima 10 years ago. And I would ask rice farmers, I would ask historians, I would ask people where to find this rice. And everybody's like, it's not existent. It's not around anymore. It doesn't exist. And this is the grandma or the founding rice grain. Without this rice, there is no other rice.
Yep.
So
exactly. So yeah, precisely so. And it took me a while. What's actually interesting, as you mentioned, is that the rice farmer that I was working with, who supported with the fundraising, I didn't know she was growing Gleberima until we connected. And then you asked, and I asked her, she's like, "Oh, I have bags of it. We grow it here." I was like, "Oh, it's a whole world of indigenous rice here." So for me, this year was also my first time actually tasting it.
This goes back to the spirit of FieldTrip is rice is culture, rice is life. I mean, we have the proof of that. But this, again, to draw it back to the epidemic and what we've all dealt with, is I don't know that we would have had the time to make these connections without being stuck in our homes. You obviously had to make a huge change to your business model, Abena, in having to, you and I talked about how much money do you allocate for Facebook now? How much money do you for all this online marketing to get your food to people? But there is the fact that you have somebody with a passion in JJ, how long ago was it that you first went to Ghana? I was stalking you on Instagram a couple of days ago to just like remind myself of all of the things. And there was a great flashback to you in Ghana cooking. And what a beautiful moment that was. When was that?
2011.
So it's those crazy sort of shamanic moments in our lives where you have a couple of people like yourself, JJ, who have a platform that is beyond, your platform is beyond, that have the ability to affect, to reverse, let's say, hundreds of years of, because what we're not calling it is the indigenous grains, and this is consistent across the world. The indigenous grains of groups of people are demeaned, right? And treated as lesser. I experienced that growing up in the South. Rice is very much a part of my life in the South, different type, but and different kinds of greens in the South that again are looked down on as, oh, that's not, until they became really cool in restaurants in New York City. So there's that opportunity to reverse the trend of taking the things that are beautiful about a community in Ghana in this particular instance, whitewashing it, genericizing it, McDonaldizing it, and taking it back to the community and saying, I mean, that's a beautiful story about the rice being able to be delivered locally. But Abena, what else needs to happen? Because I know the fact that there's a lot of interest, especially post-COVID, in superfoods, in gut health, in extending life through food in the West, there's your demand. And there's your money, your easy money to spend. People over here want to spend the Whole Foods dollars on buying from you. How do you work the other side of the market in Ghana to encourage farmers to continue to produce those crops, and for people to believe that what they have at their hands, their fingertips, is actually really a lot better than what's sort of become trendy?
Yeah, I think if I can go a little bit deeper into the politics of food here, I think, you know, because of colonialism, right, a lot of indigenous foods were devalued. So foods like chocolate, cocoa that could be commodified, you know, sugar cane for sugar, cotton, all these food had a higher value because you could commodify it, grow it, pack it, ship it, sell it, right? A lot of indigenous food didn't follow that formula. You couldn't necessarily commercialize, you couldn't necessarily pack it. And it also didn't really have a market out West, right? Whether in Europe or in North America. And so eventually a lot of indigenous foods were deemed as inferior foods. They were put down low. Whereas a lot of foreign foods eventually became seen as the better food. And then as time went on, when a lot of different seeds became genetically modified, so we got different, you know, variations of the rice or white rice, or, you know, different variations of wheat or millet, a lot of the newer genetically modified seeds were now considered to be better and far superior to a lot of the indigenous seeds and a lot of the indigenous foods. So a lot of the foreign foods, or I say food with genetically modified food, had more marketing, they had more push, and they flooded the market. And so the local farmer who was growing the indigenous food, their food became more expensive, right? So even if you go to market right now and you're looking to buy a bag of the indigenous rice, it's more expensive, right, than getting any other basmati or any other white rice, right? One, because the indigenous rice, they don't necessarily have a mill to mill it yet. It's really hard rice. The husk is hard to come off from the rice itself. It's easily brittle, and it takes a really long time to cook. I will not lie. It takes about an hour to cook, right? 45 minutes, unless you soak it the night before. But it's also like that because cultures in the past were not rushing, right? They were not rushing to go somewhere and get 20 million things done. So food is not just for consumption, right? It's that culture and ritual and storytelling. It tells us who we are. It tells us about our DNA and our grandparents and our great-grandparents. Now, food, I'm not saying food doesn't have that much meaning, but we don't often bring that kind of meaning to food anymore, right? For a lot of us, it's just consuming food to get full and go away. So what's really happening is that a lot of foreign foods are flooding the market. Believe it or not, you know, Ghana imports carrots. Ghana imports tomatoes. We can grow it. Ghana even imports chicken, right? It's bizarre. You think local free range chicken walking around, why not? because it's cheaper to actually import a lot of these foods than it is now to actually pay the farmers, right, who can grow it organically and locally. So for a lot of farmers, they're disenfranchised because if you're growing the food, if you're growing the rice, and a farmer that's growing corn would rather make, let's say, $100 per bag, you're not even going to make $100 per bag because you're probably charging $500 per bag, right? Because time, labor, and etc. And so because there isn't a market for a lot of the indigenous foods locally, and also because a lot of the indigenous foods are now expensive, farmers are dishing it because you have a farm, you have to pay for your inputs, you have to pay for your labor, your time. And at the end of 4 or 5 months, you hope it rains, enough so you can harvest. So if you don't have enough and you're considered a poor farmer, then growing a lot of the superfoods or the local foods really don't work out. It doesn't work out economically. And it also doesn't work out in so many other ways. So you find out a lot
That's
of
also in the United States too. When you think about rice farmers in the United States, right? Most of them are growing some type of heirloom or ancestral rice that they freshly mill and they show up to the farmer's market with, and they sell a minimal of that. Most of the rice they do produce is a commodity style rice. I mean, I'll even go back into something you're saying that just like made my mind go crazy was Jefferson Red Rice, going like real deep, like in like ancestral grains. So there's a grain called Jefferson Red Rice. Mm-hmm. The reason why it's called Jefferson Red Rice, because red rice during the era of the gold crop pointed back to West Africa, and they didn't want to sell red rice because that meant that West African slaves were you could still see their rice pursuer, who they were on the table, mm-hmm. right? Because people were loving the red rice, the bite, the flavor. When Thomas Jefferson came along, he realized red rice, and because it's like just crazy, that red rice could be profitable, but it couldn't be called its original name. He grew the rice and he called it Jefferson Red Rice so that it could get put back on the table. Yes. Right? So when you're saying like Europeans, colonialism, these things all are affected in our agriculture system. And I think us in the United States are really seeing that now as COVID has really broken down our agriculture system. And if you go back in time, it was broken down once before and once before again. And I think if people did it all over again, they would have gave Black people land, and our agricultural system would be stronger than ever, because you see these breakdowns in the system. And that's what's really important with me and rice. Hopefully, I don't know, we'll be able to get rice from you for field trip one day. I'll be able to put it on the menu. Woohoo! But, yes. but even with Glenn at Anson Mills, he's introducing me to rice farmers to help support them so that they can grow rice the right way. So we have a Texas rice farmer where we buy 2,000-3,000 pounds of rice from him a month. And he's saying that's keeping the family alive with freshly milled rice, or they would turn everything to commodity rice. And I'm like, please don't do that. Your prices are great. And I get the product from you really easy. And everybody loves the rice. But yeah, it's the way of how the colonialism has shaped the way we have eaten food.
And it's a race to the bottom. I'm sorry to interrupt you. It's a race to the bottom, isn't it? Because now we're all used to consuming basically plastic, nutrient less food. And you guys are answering a lot of the questions that I had. So I'm going to let you keep talking, but I did want to know, JJ, how you sought out, how you through all of the subterfuge found the Abenas of the world to get the supply for your restaurant. I could speak to our time together at the Cecil, and I know how hard you worked with the bottom line to ensure that the ingredients that we were putting out were special and thoughtful and sourced ethically. So we're talking about, we talk about the amount of yield and how the yield is totally dependent on what the weather does that particular year. How are you finding these lines of supply for your restaurants that you've got 3 in Manhattan, that demand?
Well, it's tough right now, right? Supply chain is really broken down right now. I think even more or less with who's farming, there's not enough people, who's fishing, Those people don't want to do, who's driving tractor trailers? Like those kids, I grew up with those kids that became tractor trailer drivers after high school in Northeast Pennsylvania, right? It was a lucrative job for them, making $19, $20 an hour at that time. They don't want to do that anymore. Those kids are not doing that, right? So who actually gets the food from point A to point B? That's a huge concern. And that's what's going to make food, I think inflation in 2022, the price of food, we're all going to be shocked of what it costs. And I think what I'm trying to do is do some with the specialty products is like a direct to ship. So it's like, I really love this farm. How can we figure out how to direct ship to it? So maybe working with the tractor trailer company that's going into Texas and coming to New York City, right? So really building on the supply chain. Can they take multiple things on the truck and then drop it off right to us? Smaller company. Or is it working with somebody that can directly ship to me on DHL or FedEx, right? That price might increase a little bit because you're paying for the shipping costs, but that's okay because you can control the product. You're getting the best product. But it's all about supply and demand. If you're able to make somebody produce enough of a product, then you will get the product. You will keep it going. Like we can go back. I can give you a couple of examples. Martin's potato rolls were going to go out of business before Shake Shack came, right? Danny Meyer and Shake Shack is a direct investor in Martin's potato rolls. Look it up. You will see it, right? They kept that business open, a business that was going to fail. Chipotle uses pork farmers to produce their pork just for them. It's a supply chain, then goes to the co-packer. So there's ways where people are utilizing farms. Nyman Ranch, we're all familiar with Nyman Ranch. People are fighting over their bacon. If it's Pret, if it's Shake Shack, if it's McDonald's now who might get Nyman Ranch on this new buy for their bacon, people are going directly to the source to get it and then figuring out who's going to deliver the food. So I think that's how you can drop the price down. That keeps somebody's business open. It helps the supply chain move in an ethical way. My goal always for FieldTrip was, yes, we are a rice-based restaurant, but was to help bring back rice farming in the right way. So people can actually eat rice the way it's supposed to be. It doesn't taste like plastic. You get all the nutritional facts. There's something we say at FieldTrip about the black rice we have. It's grown black, it's cultivated black, and it's sold black. You can't do anything about the process of the China black rice. And most people have never consumed it, right? And then they find out it's good for diabetes, it's good for vitamin B. And then they come in and just purchase the rice steamed because they just want it at the table. And that's all we're just trying to do at FieldTrip is really help one part of the food system that everybody loves, or if they don't love it, they'll love it again, but we've all have consumed one day in our life, and that's rice.
Can I invite you to open your next field trip in Louisville, Kentucky, please?
I'm going to talk to you, Brooke, about Louisville.
It's but that's another conversation. That's another conversation. But I will say, I mean, what do people do in the rest of the US? We have our attendees tonight and this afternoon are both in the United States and in Europe. How do they conscientiously consume apart from subscribing to Abena, which I suggest all of you do right now? I posted her website on the chat. But also you've got these beautiful ancestral kits, Abena, that I want you to talk about as well, that people can really take a tour through the offerings that she has on hand and take advantage of things that are seasonal and ready to ship out of Ghana. But what, again, do you suggest people do, Chef? And then I want to talk about responsibilities because you've done a really good job at shouting out people at Cookout as well.
What I'm doing at Cookout?
Yeah, I want to circle back to that of the people you've shouted out on Cookout. We can talk, but I first want you to give advice to everyone who's not in New York City as to where they seek out. I mean, you've called out a couple of different. I didn't know that Chipotle sourced their pork in a certain way. I mean, maybe call out some of the restaurants where people can make more informed decisions on supporting food chains that are sustainable as well as helpful to actual local farmers.
So I think we all here, people that are watching, all should support Abena, what she's doing, right? She can get you the grains, she can get you the ancestral food. It will come to your doorstep. Just start there, right? And these are baba, fonio. I know here in the United States and Europe, we're seeing fonio a lot now, in all supermarkets, but these are coming from local farmers that don't want to make the crop anymore. And just us here can help these farmers stay alive. So start there. And then I always love to just start at the local farmers market or your local butcher shop or your sea monger, right? Seafood monger, like any of those places are good to start and just talk to them. I remember there used to be a butcher shop in Harlem on 116th Street. I used to ask them, where did they get their grass-fed beef from? They were getting it from a place in upstate New York. I then jotted that place down, called them and said, hey, would you supply this beef? It's really tasty for my restaurant. And then we started that. So sometimes it's just picking up the phone. I think right now, more than ever, we can actually purchase food directly from places that only restaurants were able to purchase food from before. And that will help push business in different directions. You can get grass-fed beef, you can get Wagyu beef, you can get scallops out of the ocean 5-day, 10-day, 19 days. There's all these things that you didn't know about before, and how us as a chef, we're purchasing items that you as a consumer can purchase now anywhere in the world. And you can really right there in your local community. Don't think that your local community doesn't have cool stuff. They have something that everybody else wants. So really just start there. And I tell my mom in Northeast Pennsylvania, like, go to the farmer's market. It's right down the street. Stop going to Walmart. Just go there and buy your produce, right? Because rural America forgets that rural America produces for the world. So there's beautiful corn and apples and all these things that are just right there in our own backyard that we forget about. As we heard, right? Getting chicken imported, getting corn imported, buying basmati rice, all those things. So just keep that in mind in your local community.
And then Abena, how can we be helpful directly with you? I mean, we've posted your website, but tell us how we can subscribe and best be supportive of you. I know I want to hold, I'm going to hold JJ to it for serving your rice and your grains at FieldTrip. But influencers, I mean, how do they affect your ability to sort of infiltrate the market and get people excited about what you're doing?
Thanks, Brooke. Thanks, Jaysha. I want to say something quickly. I think for me, consuming indigenous foods is also about preserving the seeds, right? So even if we look at the rice that we're talking about now, the Offeh-Gyimah, it was pest resistant. It was drought resistant, right? This is a rice that you didn't need to add fertilizer to grow. You didn't need to add any chemicals to grow. It could literally grow in any soil, in any weather condition, right? The yield was low, but it was able to provide all these things for us. So I think for me, eating a lot more indigenous food it's not just about the health. It's not just about the story, the tradition, but also the environment, right? It's about preserving the biodiversity, right, within the ecosystem. Right now, we're only growing monocultures of food, and within the monocultures of food, we're losing a lot of seeds. Just about 3 weeks ago, I was in one part of Ghana. I was doing a hike in a farm, and I came across this red corn. I'd never seen red corn like that in my life. And the farmer only had three cubs. And so I asked him, like, can I have one? It was organic. And he said they've stopped growing it in Ghana about 10 years ago. So I went online, I was doing research, and then I took a picture and I posted it, and a lot of people are commenting. And a friend of mine actually sent me an article that said that rice was about to go extinct in North America. And this is a rice. It's either the strawberry popcorn or like one of those really red corn. So I took some, dried it, and I sent it to a couple of farmers to grow it. I'm like, grow it, preserve it. But for me, it's about preserving the ecosystem, preserving the biodiversity. And so, yes, I have the ancestral food kits. You can start by supporting me. You can also support otherly, locally grown, local farmers. You can also support other small businesses. I think for me, it's also engaging with small businesses. Also ask questions. One of the things that I get, for instance, is that shipping is expensive, and it is if you're shipping from Toronto. There's nothing I can really do about shipping. I really wish I'm working on that, but I'm a small business, right? And as I grow, hopefully, I'll be able to get that support, with shipping. So there's some challenges. Sometimes people want to order, but the shipping is super expensive, and that can turn people off. But also, as we grow as businesses, hopefully that will become more affordable. So I think for me, it's really just asking questions, right? Engage with small business owners, as JJ had mentioned, right? Go to local farmers market, talk to the farmers, ask questions. And I think once you get to know people's stories, once you get to know people's journey, then you really know. For me, my dream is to buy a farm and be able to, grow a lot of these indigenous foods and be able to preserve a lot of these ancestral foods and seeds. I can go on and on, but yes, that's
an incredible dream. And when you were talking earlier about baobab being 3,500 years old and the consumption of that, the stories that are a part of that seed, I think is fascinating. And I can see a really extraordinary cookbook collaboration with a bunch of different, you share with a bunch of different great chefs who have massive platforms, your different grains and options, and they create something beautiful, they bake something beautiful, and share it with the world. I think part of the bridge has to be understanding how to make something with it, that's for me. I mean, once I learned how to make a type of meat or a type of veg or whatever, then it becomes something that I'm passionate about perfecting. And it takes the intimidation of, oh, I don't know what to do with this, away from it, and it becomes exciting to share. So I would love to see that happen for you too, Abena.
Thanks. Yes, you actually mentioned a good point. One of the challenging things for a lot of folks is, how do I use this? I haven't had this kind of grain in a long time. And I think for a lot of us too, because our taste buds have shifted. And so when you're eating certain grains or certain whole foods, it's very earthy, very raw. And for a lot of folks, it's a bit difficult. So I think definitely all the foods are gluten-free, right? They're whole foods, they're organic. I share recipes on my page, on Instagram, on the website as well. And I'm looking forward to more partnership with chefs who can make wonderful things, who can bake with it, make breads, wraps, whatever else they can make with it. So looking for those kinds of partnerships to be able to explore the versatility, right, of using millet and fonio and baobab and all these other foods.
Amazing. I want to make sure that everyone for the audience knows you can ask questions in the chat. I will pick them up. I'm looking at it right now. So if you have questions, please go ahead and type them. Don't be afraid. But I want to talk to you, JJ, quickly about the cookout. Tell me about where this particular venture started. I love it. I love the accountability. I love the point of view. It's long overdue, but please tell me from whence it came.
So my buddy Eric over at LinkedIn reached out to me. We've done a couple of projects like with Ryan Leslie and some fun stuff. And he was like, hey man, like there's this big white space for like Black food media. Why doesn't anybody talk about Black food? Like nobody talks about it. And this is somebody that's not in the food world at all. It's like, I follow Eater, Grub, everything. And I'm always looking for Black food culture. But most of the time I'm getting information from rappers or artists or athletes on where to eat. And most of those places are pushing me to restaurants that already have a wait list or a product that's already sold out that you can't get your hands on. So I said, well, why don't we do something in a newsletter form, similar like Morning Brew or New York Times newsletter edition in the morning, where we just talk about food, Black food culture in many different ways. And we came out with the name The Cookout because the best things always happen at the cookout in Black communities. Brooke, you're from the South. You've been to plenty of cookouts. I know that. And we'll form these conversations. We'll talk about food ingredients. We'll talk about maybe how people are investing. So we kind of get on a Zoom link like this with a couple people from my team, a couple people from Eric's team. We throw different ideas around. And then we come out with a weekly newsletter that just talks about Black food culture. And hopefully it helps bring awareness to just certain things. Last week was about grits. Do you like sweet or savory? We could debate all day on how you like your grits. Week before that, we talked about who's investing in the food world, and that black athletes have been heavily investing in the food world. I think one person, I can't think of his name, he's a billionaire, being the largest franchisee owner for Wendy's. Shaq saved Papa John's, right? So
you're talking about some Louisville folks. You're talking about Junior Bridgman and
yes.
And the other gentleman's name I won't mention, because again, I mean, the thing that I got excited, that I got irritated about to an exponential degree, was that you've got these Black athletes and high net worth individuals bailing out old corporate dogs. And you said on the cookout, what if a rapper dropped 10 million on a casual, cool concept?
Yeah,
and how that would affect
the wealth gap. Yeah, so it's like bridging the wealth gap. So I'm not saying that these investments aren't bad investments. I'm not, these are good investments, but can they diversify their portfolio to people out there that are doing well? Why I gave a shout out to Chris Paul, because Chris Paul is investing in Black food culture. It is his team's, he has missioned out his team to do that. He invested in Slutty Vegan, right? Gave her a big check. That's going to help push the culture. So these are just things that are going on, and we're just trying to bring awareness. What is this week's about? This week's about I forgot. Oh, I think the debate is cornbread, sweet or savory. That's our opinion section, sweet or savory cornbread. But, you know, we'll highlight food business that are doing really great things, that the media, what we're reading about, is not talking about these places. And I think the biggest place that I've just learned about, they're based out of Alabama. They have 9 locations now. They're a pizza chain, and I can't think of the name right now. He has 9 locations, is Black owned. Nobody talks about what he's doing. And you don't have 9 locations just because you have a lot of money in the bank. People like the food, you're doing something right. And that's what we're trying to just highlight on what we're doing. So don't worry, we're gonna be talking about Fonio, we're gonna be talking about Glamourima, we're gonna be talking about all that good stuff. But that's why I started to cook out. It's just avoiding the space. And I am seeing, Brooke, media going back to the way they used to write previously, before George Floyd, going back that way. And it makes me nervous, because there's so many people of color, all people of color, doing great things in the food space. And we've been doing great things our whole life, our families, before our families. And we don't, enough people just don't talk about what we're doing.
Well, this is what's terrifying about the collective human memory. It's so brief. And that is why it's so important that people like you and Abena, and if I may, Terroir, exist in this world, because we're here to remind people. And it is at times an exhausting endeavor to circle back and keep reminding people. But if you deliver the message with a spoonful of sugar, and that is not to say my vote for cornbread or grits is sweet, because I am a savory girl all the way. But with a little bit of sweetness, I think you can get people on your side. I'm getting a question in the chat about how people can be involved in the cookout, and I wanted to mention it because it makes me laugh every time, and because it's so smart, it's so fun, it's so engaging, and I love the product that you are making at cookout, because I think everyone's going to learn from that and develop more passion about Black food and places to find and support the Black food culture that we have all benefited from and enjoyed forever. So how best can be, I'm a subscriber, but is there another way to get involved, JJ?
Yeah, I mean, I'll drop the link in the chat. So everybody, if you're not subscribed, love for you to subscribe. I'll drop the link in a second. It all depends on how you want to be involved. I'll drop in an email as well. I think I'm looking at chat. Arlene, we can definitely, we can talk offline and see how you envision getting involved in a cookout. I think the cookout will evolve. And of course, I look back in time to see who's done great things in the food space, like David Chang, when he had his at that beginning moment of what he was trying to do, right?
Yeah.
There's been some players in the space that have tried to do something. We're just keeping it simple. We're just being informative. We're bringing some laughter to it with memes. And we want people to talk. We want to hear what you have to say. We want you to give feedback. We want to know if you're a savory person. We want to know if you feel like people said to me, I think we talked about soul food one time, for us, by us. And one of my friends was like, what do you mean for us, by us? Like, are you telling me it's not for us? And it's like, no, that's what it is, So it's a conversation, and hopefully it bridges a gap. That's always been my goal, is that we're able to build bricks together. But there's a space, there's this white space that we need to talk about. It's the same thing with in ancestral grains, right? There's a space where nobody's talking about it. And now we're talking about it. And hopefully we'll look back in 5 years and 10 years and we'll see all these grains on the shelf and we know who to thank for that.
That's exactly right. And just to speak to that, Idle Fair wrote, as someone who has had the pleasure of trying out Abena's ancestral food kits, it's been incredible to eat these grains. The nutritional value of the food is superior. Eating these foods have allowed me to reclaim my own ancestral recipes and delve deeper into my own cultural recipes. So that is very cool too, as a conduit to connect to your history. There's nothing more satisfying than sitting down at a meal and having that commune with, I think about that, the most wonderful ways to connect with people who have passed. It's making my grandmother's vegetable soup. It's making the pie crust that every other generation in my family apparently has the right oils in our hand to create, right? It's connecting with people through food. And that's what we do at Terroir. But it's incredible that you're providing that space, Abena, and it's a huge undertaking for a single person to reestablish that trade route, right? And so I applaud you for that, and I can't wait to try all of your items. Does anyone have any other questions? We're coming up to the end of the hour. We've had an amazing conversation with these guys. I'm going to leave it open for one more second before I tell you about what's coming up next, because we're going to see JJ and Abena again in November as part of our Terroir Symposium. And I want to invite all of you to be a part of that. Please, if you have questions, you could still add them in the chat. But just to tell you what's happening in November, Building a Better Model is our Terroir Symposium this year. It would have been hosted in Toronto, November 8th, 9th, 10th, and 15th, 16th, and 17th. Unfortunately, because of what we're talking about today, we're going to be online and in Chef JJ's kitchen, which is kind of cool, actually. It's a 2-week inspirational and educational program that provides tools, resources, and makes connections. We believe in the passion, creativity, and resilience of our community. So along with our partners, we will curate a program that supports building a better restaurant model for the future. 10% of all ticket revenues will go towards savehospitality.ca. Your all access pass that you can get at terroirsymposium.com will give you access to a town hall and with Save Hospitality, a job fair, a mentorship lunch, 24 industry sessions, of which I'm hosting a couple. So if you like hearing from me, I will be there. Spotlight on Canadian food leaders, virtual cooking demos, workshop intensives, surprise terroir gift box, hello, and a $25 voucher to a participating feast on restaurant. So please check out terroirsymposium.com to get your tickets for that in November. Quickly, Arlene would love to hear why the relationship between chefs and producers is so important and beneficial, and that will take us out.
If I can jump in here, is that okay? Okay, great. I think for me, even with this business of ancestral food, the challenge has been being able to connect with people in terms of seeing, understanding, tasting the foods. And I think chefs, chefs are trusted, right? They're trusted in the public space. They're trusted to bring good food to folks. And I think chefs are also important in terms of the connection from farm to table. When we talk about the ethical components of how food is grown and who grows food, chefs have that space to be able to bring those conversations. And I think producers are often disconnected, right? They're on the farm, you're at the back, they're growing the food, but they're not typically at the forefront to be able to tell their narrative, to be able to tell the stories. And I think it's important for chefs to be able to build that connection so they can bring the narrative and the storytelling to the food. Like, you know, bringing the food, bringing the narrative, right? The histories and the stories to the food that they're making. So I think that, chefs play, I'm trying to rush to respond to it as time is ending, but really play a critical role in terms of the storytelling piece, but also in terms of the ethical piece around food ownership, right? And bringing that conversation to the restaurant.
Look at
I
what
didn't
Sean
want to
Brock,
rush
look
you
at
at
what
all,
Sean
but
Brock, look at what Sean Brock did with Carolina Go Rice, right? Him and Glenn Roberts were really close hand in hand, and then Carolina Go Rice exploded. You'll see me and Abena are going to do a lot of things with Glamourima to make it explode, even though it might be coming from one place to another. So the chef plays a major role.
Huge, huge.
I cannot wait to partake in all of those things. And I thank you both so much for your time today. I know this is a special conversation for the Terroir team, especially for me and for everyone attending today. I really appreciate your time. I really appreciate your passion and what you give to your community, of which I feel very much a part. So thank you, thank you, thank you. And to everyone who joined us tonight, thank you so much. And I hope to see you in November. Cheers, guys.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.